Hey everybody, this is Todd with Industrial Comfort. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to make a Mancala board like this one the right way. Now, I think it's a game that was originated in Africa. Truth be told, I don't know how to play it, but I got tired of watching my daughter and wife play on a really crappy looking board. So I decided to make them a good one out of a block of cherry with some inlaid maple and dyed veneer. Now most people will take a piece of wood like this, which we're going to make for our template, and they'll simply glue this to a backer board and call it their Mancala board. Now, I'm going to show you the right way to do this with a router and a dish bit. This will eliminate any seams that you're going to get from gluing two pieces of wood together. It will also give you a nice contoured bottom to the pits that will allow you to easily remove the pieces. Is this thing perfect? No, which is surprising because I'm type A, but you'll notice here that there are some burr marks. Make sure you run your drill bit at the slowest speed possible for drilling into a hardwood like cherry, if that's the wood that you decide to use. Anyway, let's get started. I'm going to start the project using a piece of 3/4 inch pine that's 6 1/4 inches wide by 22.5 inches long. Now, a Mancala board is made up of 2 rows of 6 pockets with a long pocket on either end for the player to catch their Mancala pieces. Now, I'm using a 2-inch Forstner bit, or I will be using a 2-inch Forstner bit to create these pockets, and I'd like them to be spaced a 1/2 inch from one another. So what I'm going to do is make 8 lines across this board spaced out at 2.5 inches to account for the appropriate spacing. Now I'm starting these lines 2 1/4 inches in from the edge so that I have a 1 1/4 inch buffer between the long pocket on the end and the edge. What I'm going to do after I create these 8 lines is then measure up 1 3/4 inches to note the center of where I'm going to start drilling these holes. And that will give me 3/4 inch of buffer between the holes and the side edges. With a 2-inch Forstner bit, I'm now going to drill the 16 holes that I marked on this template. Drilling these holes is going to be as painful to watch as it was to drill, so I'm going to fast forward through much of this. A Mancala board has 2 oblong pockets on either end of the board. So what I've done here is use double-sided tape to stick 2 pieces of wood on either side of the first 2 holes on each end of the board. And I made sure that these pieces of wood were lined up precisely with the edge of each hole that we drilled. And then we're going to use a router with a flush cut bit to remove the material from between the holes. A flush cut bit has a bearing on the top that will allow us to run that bearing along the pieces of wood up top, and everything underneath will be cut out. So we'll use this technique to remove the material between the holes. Routers are very sharp and very powerful machines. You'll notice that I get a little bit of bucking here as I'm removing some of this material, which is an incredibly frightening experience. What I should have done, and what would have been best practice, would have been to use a jigsaw to remove some of this material, as when you try to cut too much material with a router, it will tend to bite into the wood and buck a little bit. Now, the other thing that I want to call out here is make sure that as you're running your router bit across the top piece of wood from one hole into the next, that you do not go past the center point of the hole, or you'll ruin the integrity of the arc of the circle on either end of each hole. For the actual Mancala board, I'm using a piece of cherry, and I've sandwiched some maple and a strip of dyed veneer in the center just to keep things fancy. Now you can use any wood that you want, just make sure that it is wider and longer than the template we just made. Now this particular piece of wood is a little bit thicker than what we need at about an inch and 7/8. You're comfortably going to want something closer to an inch and a half, but this was the thickness of the wood and I didn't really feel like planing it to death. So I'm going to be leaving it a little bit thicker. I've mounted some double-sided tape to the underside of the template that we made in the last step. Once I remove the backing for this double-sided tape, I'm going to flip it over and I'm going to place the template on top of the wooden board that's going to serve as our Mancala game, taking care to center the template based on the lines that I've drawn on the piece of dyed veneer that I have between the two pieces of maple. With the template now stuck to the board, I'm going to bring over to the drill press and again re-drill each one of these 2-inch holes with the Forstner bit, going down a 1/2 inch. I want the final depth to be 3/4 of an inch, but we'll take the remaining 1/4 inch material out using the router bit. I'm now going to finish the pockets with what's called a dish bit. And this router bit has a bearing on the top that will ride against the sides of the template, serving as a guide, and that will allow us to carve out a rounded bottom to each of the pockets. You'll notice that as I'm routing, I'm going down in steps, and same concept applies from when we removed material from the template. You never want to try to remove too much material at once, so we go down in 1/8 inch increments until we get to the desired depth. With the routing complete and the template still on the top of the board, I use the template as a guide to trim the excess wood around the template. With the template removed, I bring over to the router table and use a 3/8 inch radius roundover bit to smooth over the edges. With the routing complete, I get to sanding. For the final finish, I'm opting to use boiled linseed oil because I like the color it produces and it's just easy to put on. And here is our Mancala board. As I called out at the beginning of the video, I did get some burn marks, as you can see in here, because I was running my drill too fast. And I just didn't feel like putting the effort in to sand them out by hand. So if you are going to take on this project, just make sure to run your drill at a slower speed than I did, ideally as slow as possible for hardwoods. And if you liked this video and found it helpful, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe. Thanks for watching.